the stuff I was inspired by early on was really quirky, odd music, and a lot of it was coming from the cartoons I was watching. Like the Looney Tunes that I grew up with, and a lot of people grew up with, had this wonderful music by Warner Brothers musical director Carl Stalling, who would take like the music of the time from the 30s or 40s and classical music, and then do these really fun things with it, where he would essentially was inventing the remix because he would take, let's say, like a popular song of the era, and then like play it really fast with an orchestra, or really slow, and or just make it go into a weird like samba thing, and then back out again, and then deconstruct it and rebuild it. So he was like turning music into rubber essentially and remixing it in real time with human beings in an orchestra. So I would listen to these scores just by themselves. Like if you hear like a cartoon score without the context, it becomes like the most experimental, strange music you've ever heard.
Absolutely.
And I would like do my homework listening to this stuff, and at the same time, I was into like punk rock and new wave, and there was certain bands that were doing really quirky stuff at that time in the early '80s, the post-punk era. I guess you would call it like new wave post-punk, but bands like Devo and Oingo Boingo were like almost like cartoon bands in a lot of ways, right? And these guys from these bands ended up being composers. The guy from Devo, his name was Mark Mothersbaugh, and he ended up doing the music for Rugrats
Oh, wow.
and, and for Pee Wee's Playhouse. And today he's like really big composer who did like Thor Ragnarok and a bunch of stuff. Now the
Yeah, that's about as big as you can get.
and the band Oingo Boingo, which is a really weird band, of course, that was Danny Elfman's band.
Yep.
He ultimately became one of the biggest living composers on the planet too. But these guys were wired to do really weird stuff. Like they were just thinking very differently. When I heard that as a young guy, I heard that music, like let's say in Pee Wee's Playhouse, for example, it had Mark Mothersbaugh and Danny Elfman doing music for that show. And I was like, wow, this is like the weirdest, strangest shit I've heard, and it's more interesting and more compelling than the stuff on MTV or the radio. Like incidental background music is sounds infinitely more subversive and strange and compelling than anything I'm hearing anywhere else. So I'm like, I could do that. I want to infiltrate the minds of children through cartoons and put like stuff that has inspired me in there that could blow their minds too, if possible. Like expose them to my influences. Like if a kid likes something I'm doing on a show, and there's like musical references to some weird, obscure, post punk band, or like a Raymond Scott from the '30s, or Black Flag punk rock stuff. Like then I've sort of done my job. Like I've exposed people to like amazing, rich music history that matters to me, and I'm helping sort of pass the legacy of these artists that mean the world to me to another generation of people. You
Oh,
know,
100%. And I feel like that's very rarely done nowadays on like a large scale. But I remember as a child, a different alley, but playing Guitar Hero. That's how I got into rock music. That's
absolutely.
purely how I was exposed to, you know, Aerosmith, Journey, like all these guys where when I started writing music as a child, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make classic rock because I was exposed to that at 9, 10 years old, playing a video game with a fake guitar. And it's just Danny Elfman is someone that I think across all boards is a huge inspirational factor to any musician if they're on that little edgy side and they've taken the dive in and he is someone that has just broken all boundaries of what is possible. And I think of him and I think of Hans Zimmer and I think of some of the more contemporary composers now. And I love watching movies without the sound on if I'm writing music. And then you find these kind of weird things of scores that you really love, or I'll go on Spotify, listen to somebody like you, I'll listen to somebody like Danny. And it's just this weird, experimental, almost sometimes like electronic music.
Yeah, yeah.
And from where we are on this side of the age where we're doing these at the raves and we're doing this here and there, when I listen to scores like Cuphead, and then I listen to some of these deeper, darker experimental artists. like
Yeah.
there's not much of a difference. It's this weird boundary pushing thing where yours is more, infiltrated by organic instruments, but it still has this energy to it that's just like pushing like I talk to my students sometimes and it's like pushing a gorilla forward. You're like pushing the stamina throughout the score. And I just think that taking from inspirations and like passing it to the next generation is what will continue to break the boundaries of sound as far as scoring and just releasing music in general, because going from like marketable music
Yeah.
to, I would say, your type of scoring is a totally different animal to approach and master. And people like you and people like Danny, have you guys just have such this niche sound that you have created these like cult followings of your music, which is super awesome. I know it sounds kind of like cult. You're like, oh no, but it's like that's what you want
Yeah.
as an artist.
Let me talk about what you said earlier about when you hear the score and you that pushing. What did you call it? The gorilla.
Like the gorilla. That's what I always say. Like if I'm talking about like percussion work or hi hats or like where you have like your 808s or your subs or something sitting in the 0 to like 100 hertz frequency, that like
Right.
momentum of pushing that forward is like what is driving everything in the whole entire spectrum of sound.
That comes from, at least for me as a composer, um, and it comes from a couple of places. And it's not from classical music. It's not from other scores. When I grew up with punk rock. Like this music means a lot to me, right? Being at a punk rock show and watching an audience, like when you see the circle pit happening,
Circle pit, the mosh pits, the circle pits. Yeah.
it takes all your energy to not want to dive in there. Like I was at a show recently. It's like I don't want to hurt myself, but I just want to smash my face into the ground right here because this is fucking amazing. Now, punk rock does it, and EDM does it as well. When you see a certain band performing, you see, or you know, when you see like an artist, even just a simple DJ, and you see the way the audience is responding, you realize how real what that person is doing on that stage is. Like, I cannot take away anything from someone that's on a laptop if they have that kind of command of an audience. That is more fucking real than anything out there. Like, Hans Zimmer doesn't make me want to move like that. But Daft Punk or Justice will do that to me because it's that amazing.